most prominent news of the week was the execution of a Ukrainian prisoner. Let's recall. A video appeared in which a Ukrainian soldier says "Glory to Ukraine," and in response, he is shot with a rifle, obviously by the Russian military personnel. It is already known where this took place, near Solidar. It is very likely that the Wagner private military group carried out the execution. The shooting is, of course, a war crime. We should not be mistaken. Even under the Russian law, any form of the death penalty is prohibited, including during wartime. Judging by the way the murder was carried out, the shooters were ready for it and did not hesitate. They probably did this not for the first time, meaning it was not a random occurrence. The victim who became a symbol of courage is Alexander Matseyevsky, a sniper from the 163rd Battalion of the city of Nizhin in the Chernigov region. His body was returned before the video's appearance, and he was buried on February 14th. Ukraine Security Service has launched an open investigation under the Article 438 of the Criminal Code for violation of the laws and customs of war. I am confident that, like other war crimes, this will be investigated to the end, and the specific perpetrators will be found and brought to justice. Now let's see what's happening on the front. This week, Russian troops continued to storm the city of Mariinka, using the same tactics of gradually destroying positions with direct tank fire. But even completely destroyed, Mariinka still resists the Russian forces. Video from a Ukrainian soldier. This is the city center of Mariinka. However, the most important events occurred, of course, in Bakhmut and its suburbs. Let's take a look. At the northern outskirts, Wagner was able to advance further in these directions, even closer to the village of Khromovo. Here's the settlement of Dubovo-Vasilievka. In this video, Wagner claims its capture. Today, March 8th, we, the Wagner Group, fully liberated the settlement of Dubovo-Vasilievka. Besides, Wagner penetrated Zobakhmutovka, which is on the eastern bank of the Bakhmutska River. This district is where Prigozhin filmed a video near the monument with a T-34 tank, meaning there were no active battles there and it was relatively safe. Various Russian propagandists filmed videos while walking around neighborhoods somewhere in the middle of the week. This means that Wagner was able to push back the Ukrainian troops a little further. In addition, attacks are currently taking place from the north to here, in the Ozol plant's industrial zone. Analysts also point out that fighting is going on in the direction of Ivanovsky, where the monument to the MiG-17 aircraft is located. But of course, the Ukrainians continue to resist. Let me show you roughly where their positions are now. They are defending this part and have built a front along the Bakhmutka River, and are fighting for the Azov industrial zone. They're also holding off attacks in the areas of Khromovo, Bogdanovka and Ivanovsky, because important roads run through there. For example, there is a Ukrainian video from Bakhmut that shows they are still in control of the southern part of the city as of March 10th. In the south of Bakhmut, the monument to the MiG-17 aircraft, which became famous, was destroyed. Earlier it stood here, but now it is gone. Apparently, Wagner did not like that Ukrainian soldiers often filmed themselves near the monument and made patriotic videos, so Wagner decided to destroy it, most likely with artillery. Despite significant losses on both sides, the armies continue to battle in Bakhmut, and the Ukrainian army has not left the city. We will talk about the cost of the battle, especially for Wagner's soldiers, in the next block. According to Sergei Shoigu, Russian Minister of Defense, the losses of the Ukrainian army in February increased by 40% and amounted to more than 11,000. Shoigu also emphasized that Bakhmut is an important defense hub in the Donbass, so the Russian army will continue to try to liberate it, as Shoigu phrases it. Shoigu, of course, did not speak about the Russian losses. I'm sure he has no idea how many, for example, mercenaries were killed near Bakhmut. According to NATO intelligence estimates, for every Ukrainian soldier killed there, there are no fewer than 5 losses of Russian forces. A Guardian journalist reported on his Twitter account that according to their data, the Russian army lost between 20,000 and 30,000 people throughout the entire period of the fighting near Bakhmut, making this battle the bloodiest of the war. In total, the names of 16,674 deceased Russian military personnel have been identified. The number continues to increase. Only in the last 2 weeks, reports have been found of the deaths of 1,638 people. The largest number of burials is in the Urals, in the Sverdlovsk and Chelyabinsk regions, Bashkortostan, Buryatia, and Dagestan. Right now, this is largely connected to the large number of mobilized troops from the Urals regions. This week, another prisoner exchange took place, and it was quite large. 130 Ukrainian and 90 Russian soldiers returned home. More than half of the released Ukrainians are members of the Azov battalion. But there are also those who were captured relatively recently near Bakhmut and Solidar. There was no clarification about the specific military personnel who returned to Russia. Judging by the age of some of the people in the video, they could be volunteers or mercenaries from the Wagner Group. Overall, there have been 38 exchanges between the two sides over the past year. Some of them were announced publicly, while others were hidden. More than 3,000 prisoners from both sides have been released. As we can see from these statistics, exchanges usually favor the Ukrainian army, as they manage to negotiate for more people. However, the Russian army is not as dependent on people as it is on equipment. Over the 380 days of the war, the Russian army has lost 1,835 tanks, 3,339 armored vehicles, including BMPs, BMDs, BTRs. 542 artillery guns and self-propelled artillery systems have been destroyed or captured, as well as 180 multiple rocket launch systems. 77 planes and 79 helicopters were shot down. Losses of 40 more tanks have been confirmed this week. And I would like to remind you that the Russian industry can produce only 20 new tanks per month, approximately. By the way, a small T-90 tank was noticed in the train in Lipetsk in Russia. There were only 3 such tanks. In the Ukrainian army, as of March 11th, 474 tanks and 1,047 armored vehicles were destroyed. 233 artillery installations and 40 volley fire systems were lost. And the losses of 61 planes and 31 helicopters were confirmed. No European army has as many weaponry as has already been destroyed in the Ukrainian army. Deliveries of weapons remain a vulnerable spot. More equipment is needed, especially if we're going to prepare for a major counteroffensive. Another 10 Polish Leopard tanks were sent to Ukraine, and Norway is transferring 2 fully equipped air defense platoons, which means 6 or 8 installations. They will be very useful because on Thursday night, Ukraine got hit by another large rocket strike. Mainly energy facilities in 8 different regions were targeted. 34 out of 48 cruise missiles were shot down by air defense forces. In Kiev, there was a strike on a power plant, causing emergency shutdowns. In the Lvov region, a rocket fell in a residential area, killing 5 people and destroying 3 private houses. Even Russian propagandists did not report the destruction of military targets. The purpose of the shelling is clear. It's to terrorize the civilian population, as before. The winter is ending, and it's already clear that Ukraine is not going to freeze. And these senseless attacks are very similar to all other actions of the Russian army. Almost half a year ago, the decision was made to shell energy facilities, and Kremlin continues to do so without thinking why is it still necessary now. It does not affect the war, it only affects the lives of peaceful Ukrainians. But according to the UN, the number of civilian casualties has already reached 8,173 dead and 13,620 wounded. Wagner's chief, Prigozhin, is no longer allowed to recruit prisoners. Now the Ministry of Defense is handling this, and they are resorting to various tricks to somehow replenish the mercenary ranks. They will now be recruiting in sports clubs in various Russian cities, and the requirements for mercenaries have significantly decreased. Even medical certificates from psychiatrists and narcologists are no longer required for recruitment. I think you understand these recruits' careers will be very short-lived, usually ending in a few months or even weeks. This is illustrated by the cemetery near Moscow, where former prisoners who were members of Wagner are buried. Judging by the graves, nobody visits them. But Prigozhin wants to have as many of these cemeteries across Russia as possible. He is currently desperately looking for people in power who can support him and is complaining that his mercenaries are being denied ammunition. They cut off all of my communication lines in all offices and units. Another important point is that they have blocked all my passes to all agencies that make decisions. I won't name them to avoid any possibility of discrediting them. It's possible that one of Prigozhin's patrons could be Igor Sechin, the head of Rosneft oil company. It was reported that he promised to sponsor some of Prigozhin's projects, but of course, this funding will come from the state budget, not his personal account. Let's continue. The governor of Russia's Belgorod region, on the border with Ukraine, reported this week that they have completed the razor wire line, as he calls it, a foolish line of anti-tank structures. It cost, hear this, 10 billion rubles, which were invested in these concrete pyramids instead of developing the region. The War Studies Institute has already said that this is a waste of money. Ukrainian military has repeatedly stated they are only interested in liberating Ukrainian territory, so there probably won't be any actual combat there. Similar fortifications are being constructed near Kursk in Russia. This razor wire line is just a way for the authorities to show that Russia is supposedly under threat. And of course, to make money. I'm sure not even a tenth of that 10 billion was invested in those pyramids. The war in general has become an excuse for the Russian authorities to collect money from anyone, anywhere. For example, at a children's fair, craft goods made by sick children, including children with cancer, were sold, and the money went to Russian soldiers. In Uskansky, elderly and disabled people are forced to make camouflage nets and candles for trenches in their home for the disabled. There seems to be no limit to the awfulness. This week it was reported that doctors in St. Petersburg handed out military enlistment summons to male patients when they came for their appointments last fall. This happened at the clinic number 99, where Alexander Zagorodnikov is the head physician. By the way, he's also a deputy. Can you guess from which party? Of course, from Putin's United Russia party. This head physician forced employees to distribute summons and even to schedule appointments on purpose, so that patients could be given the summons. More than 100 summons were issued at the clinic, but some doctors intentionally went on vacation to avoid participating. Well, at least they did something. If you are forced to distribute summons at work, you can at least get sick, suddenly go on vacation, lose the summons, or do something else. Seems trivial, but it could save someone from death or participating in a war crime. And if you are given a summons somewhere, just don't take it. Tell them to go in the direction of the Russian military ship. Even if you don't care about others, the morals, and Ukraine, think at least about what awaits you there. And the fate that awaits you will be the same as that of the mobilized soldiers from Irkutsk, for example, who record one appeal after another. Our brigade serving in the Donetsk Republic is being sent to fight without any artillery or heavy machine guns. In short, we are sent to die in trenches without weapons or equipment, being under constant fire. The governor of Irkutsk even sent an investigative committee to the front. However, the committee reported that everything with those soldiers is going well, and they will send humanitarian aid. So think about it. You will be on the front lines. Not only you will become war criminals, but you will sit in the trenches, dying under shelling, without weapons or supplies. And officials will debate whether to find humanitarian aid for you. If you think this is an isolated case, it's not. The Verska publication registered appeals from 16 regions in just 1 month, all about the mobilized men being sent into the battle without preparation, weapons, and they're often abandoned and not even fed. This is not combat-ready army, which is why there is no major attack by Russia. Meanwhile, in the Russian city of Chita, they want to install a monument to the heroes of the so-called special operation. They will spend 11 million rubles from the budget. To find out about the real attitude toward those who were sent to war, listen to a woman from the same Chita. She told what happened to her husband. After the last battle, he has serious injuries, such as a closed head injury, concussion, problems with the vestibular apparatus. He has only 10% vision left because of it. He was prescribed treatment at a hospital, but no one sent him there, and no one will. For the Russian authorities, people are nothing more than expendable material. And of course, this shameful criminal war cannot become popular, no matter how much propaganda tries. But it still tries. A fresh example is the same biker surgeon they dug up. Remember him? He's afraid to utter the word war. So this is how this insane speech construction was born. Listen, if the special military operation does not turn into the special great patriotic operation, we will fail. If Putin's special operation can be compared to World War II, then only in terms that it will also end in a demographic catastrophe. And it's already happening. The Economist magazine calculated that over the last 3 years, Russia has lost 2 million more people than usual, and the life expectancy of young men has decreased by 5 years. If there are no cotton gauze bandages or potassium iodine pills, remain calm, and if your condition worsens, seek medical help at the nearest medical facility. In reality, there was no cause for alarm. Hackers just broke into the servers of several TV and radio stations. But in reality, the war has long since come to Russia, which is obvious without any sirens. For example, in the video from the Primorsk region, mobilized soldiers returned from the war, got drunk, and decided to shoot their guns in the center of the city. Fortunately, they were using blanks. In Stavropol, during a fight, a grenade exploded and 6 people were taken to the hospital. Fires continue to happen in Russia, and this is fresh footage from the Moscow region, where a plastic production plant caught fire today. The fire covered 5,000 square meters. Roof collapsed. Fortunately, there were no casualties. Repressions are also continuing, of course. Dmitry Ivanov, the author of the Telegram channel Protest at Moscow State University, was sentenced to 8.5 years in prison for spreading fake news. In fact, he was punished for publishing anti-war posts. In Buryatia, local activist Natalia Filinova's adopted son was sent to a children's home. Natalia herself, a pensioner, has been in pre-trial detention since November, allegedly for beating a police officer during an anti-war rally with a ballpoint pen. Remember we covered this absurd story? Also, remember the story of the 6th grade student Masha Makalova, who drew an anti-war picture. They refused to release her from a children's home. Her father is currently under house arrest and has been accused of discrediting the army. This week, a petition was launched to bring Masha home. The link is in the description, and I urge you to sign it. I understand that petitions in themselves do not work in Russia, but it's a good way to draw attention to this entire situation.
Sorry, we seem to have a problem with that, but we're going to cross to Los Angeles and speak to our correspondent, Wasim Kone, who joins us from there. So, Wasim, we've known about this deal for 18 months, haven't we? But a lot more detail emerging of exactly what is in it.
Yes, sir, as you mentioned it, we have been waiting for that deal for the past 18 months. We knew that this was coming, that there would be some sort of a closer military cooperation, that there would be an effort to boost and harmonize defense systems. We also knew that Australia was in the market for new submarines to replace its aging fleet, and now we know how it's going to do it. It is going to purchase 3 U.S.-made nuclear-powered submarines with the option of buying 2 more in the future. These Virginia-class subs will be delivered throughout the course of the 2030s. One important note, Australia has long vowed not to deploy any nuclear weapons, and that was a point that was once again emphasized several times on Monday in San Diego, that these are nuclear-powered, not nuclear-armed. And there is one other element to this announcement. The 3 countries will be working together to build a completely new class of submarines. They're calling these the SSN-AUKUS. They will be both built and deployed by Britain and Australia using U.S. technology. Now, we do have to talk about the elephant in the room, at least for France. This is really the final chapter of what's been a very painful saga for French diplomacy. You may recall that Australia initially had a $60 billion deal to buy submarines from French firm Naval. That fell apart when the country joined this 3-country alliance, AUKUS, the French foreign minister at the time calling it a stab in the back.
So what is the actual aim then for AUKUS? What's the point?
Well, listen, Stuart, on Air Force One today, as the plane made its way to San Diego, the National Security Advisor for the White House, Jake Sullivan, told reporters repeatedly that this was not about one specific country, that this was about stability in general. But make no mistake, this is a clear attempt at trying to get Beijing to back down in the Asia Pacific. Now, China has recently increased its military budget. It has upgraded its fleet. It has made even more threats toward Taiwan. You recall maybe those airspace incursions last year. And it's also began using artificial islands to turn them into offshore bases. These are all things that the West considers to be aggressive behavior that threatens the sovereignty of nations, of countries in the region. And that's how this alliance came to be. It's a tale as old as time. When there is growing instability in the world, what do countries do? Well, they turn to friendly nations to make defense deals and security pacts like this one. Now, Beijing, of course, has said that they are well within their rights to make these decisions and to act the way they are. China has not yet reacted to Monday's press conference. But in the past few days, as those rumors emerged that this submarine deal was going to be announced, the spokeswoman for the foreign ministry called on all three countries, the United States, the United Kingdom and Australia, to put an end to their Cold War attitude.
Now, shares are continuing to slide across much of the world despite strong reassurances from the US president that America's financial system is safe. That after the authorities had to step in to protect customer deposits when US lenders Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank collapsed. Silicon Valley Bank's new chief executive saying in a letter to clients that they are open and conducting business as normal. Investors, though, were fearing that other lenders will still be hit by the fallout. Well, let's have the latest on the political situation then from our correspondent in Washington, Ketevan Gorjestani.
As Joe Biden tried to reassure both Americans and markets that the U.S. banking system was safe, he also made it very clear that the government's intervention was not a bailout, that it would not cost anything to the taxpayers, and that those who were responsible would be held accountable. He immediately called on Congress to bring back some of the banking regulations that were rolled back under his predecessor, Donald Trump, a sentiment that was echoed by several progressive lawmakers, including Senators Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, who both said that the failure of these banks was a direct result of the Trump-era deregulations, which were actually passed with significant Democratic support. Meanwhile, Republicans sort of deflected from questioning or debates about the need for more banking regulations by blaming these banking collapses on bad liberal policies and pointing the finger at Silicon Valley for being too focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion instead of being focused on its own financial stability. The governor of Florida and likely Republican presidential candidate Ron DeSantis, he even went as far as to saying that these institutions had failed because they were too woke.
Now, Ukraine is admitting that Russia's Wagner mercenary group is pushing slowly forward in the industrial city of Bakhmut that has been the real epicenter of fighting in Ukraine for months now. Ukraine saying, though, that in fierce battles, its defenders are inflicting significant losses on the enemy, both sides appearing to pour significant resources into the fight, as the Wagner head himself has acknowledged that his forces are facing determined resistance. When it comes as Russia has agreed to extend the Ukraine grain export deal, but only for a further 60 days. Badika Behel reports.
After hours of talks, Russia's deputy foreign minister leaves the United Nations headquarters in Geneva. On the table was the vital deal that allows the safe export of grains from Ukraine's blockaded Black Sea ports, to which Moscow says a renewal is possible.
Russia does not object to another extension of the Black Sea Initiative after its second term expires on March 18th, but only for 60 days. Our further stance will be determined upon tangible progress on normalization of our agricultural exports, not in words, but in deeds.
This extension, however, is half the term of its previous renewals, and Ukraine's Minister of Infrastructure says that this isn't long enough.
The Black Sea Grain Initiative involves at least 120 days of extension. Therefore, Russia's position to extend the deal only for 60 days contradicts the document signed by Turkey and the UN. We're waiting for the official position of the UN and Turkey as the guarantors of the initiative.
The UN and Turkey brokered initiative was first signed last July to establish a safe 4-month maritime corridor to and from Ukrainian ports. And it was seen as averting a global food crisis that threatened several countries due to blocked Russian and Ukrainian shipments. It was subsequently extended again last November for another 120 days, with its expiry date creeping up at the end of the week. As of this month, more than 23 million tons of grain had been exported under the initiative, and it remains to be seen whether the deal will face further extension on Saturday.
And meanwhile, a Moscow court has begun trying opposition politician Vladimir Kara-Murza behind closed doors. He faces up to 25 years in prison, including for high treason. It's the latest example of an accelerated crackdown on Kremlin critics. He'd spoken out against the Russian offensive in Ukraine. He's accused of spreading false information about the Russian army and illegal work for an undesirable organisation. One of his lawyers saying the country has returned to Stalinist times. Now some other world news for you. And Brazil's former president Jair Bolsonaro is to be called to testify as part of an investigation into accusations he tried to illegally bring $3.2 million of jewellery into the country. The country's justice minister saying inquiries are in progress and at some point the former president will be subpoenaed. Lawyers for Bolsonaro saying he's agreed to hand the jewels over to the authorities. They were gifted by Saudi Arabia and entered Brazil without being declared to tax authorities. A split among jurors means there will be no death penalty for an Islamic extremist convicted of driving a truck along a bike